Hello YouTubers, welcome to the channel. It's a pleasure for me to share what I'm about to share with you today. And today I will be sharing on the name of King David, which is Mulawudi. And this name is coming from a Bantu language called Sesotho, which is spoken primarily in the southern part of Africa. Now, if you had the opportunity of coming across my previous videos, you will have heard me talk about this name of King David. Today, in this video, however, I will be going a little bit into detail, revealing how this name came about, how King David was given the name Mulawudi. Okay, in this video as well, we will be talking about the relationship between King David and Jonathan. All right, let's get right into this slide. So my first point there is the word Musala Lapeng. Musala Lapeng is a word which means the one who remains at home. So it is in the Sesotho language as well. So I've taken it apart there because this word is actually made out of three words: Mu, Sala, and Lapeng. So Mu means the one who, Sala means stay, Lapeng means home or family home. Now, Musala Lapeng is a name that was given to the youngest son of the family. And the Musala Lapeng was the one who remained at home. Now, I want us to look at the word Sala, which is also the name of the wife of Father Abraham. So Sarah or Sarah is the name of the wife of Abraham when she was barren, before she gave birth to Isaac. Her name was Sarah or Sarah. Now, for other Bantu people, it will be Sala. For others, it will be Sarah. So the L and the R in the Bantu language are interchangeable. So some Bantu languages do not have an L in their language that automatically becomes an R. So Sarah or Salah, and that is the name of the wife of Abraham before she had a son. Now, when the father spoke to Abraham and made that promise to him that he would have a son, the father also changed the name of Abraham and changed the name of Salah or Sarah, because the name Salah or Sarah means stay behind. Okay, it means it means stay behind. Okay, then the father gave Sarah a new name, and now he just changed the first letter of her name and it became a Z and it became Zara. So the name that was given to the wife of Abraham by the father was Zara. I know that in the scripture it tells a different story. It says that an H was added to the name of Sarah, but it doesn't change the meaning according to the Bantu people. So if that name is Sarah without an H, it still means stay behind. If that name is Sarah with an H, it still means stay behind. So the father has revealed that the name, he changed Abraham's wife's name to Zara or Zala, which means give birth. When you say Zara, it's actually a command saying give birth, be full, be fruitful. I do have this name as well. I've explained it as well in one of my previous videos, the name Zara, which means be fruitful. Literally in my language, it just means give birth. Okay, so that was the name that the father gave to the wife of Abraham, Zara. She was no longer Sarah. She was no longer Sarah. She was no longer the one who stays behind, the one who's left out, the one who's isolated, the one who's got no progress, the one who's right at the back. Sarah or Sala. You know, it's not a good name. You know, now the Father, because he has blessed them, has given them a new name. You are no longer at the back. You are no longer forgotten. You are no longer isolated. You are no longer secluded. You are now Zara, which means give birth. It's a command. The Father was commanding her to give birth, was commanding her body to give birth, was commanding her womb to be a different womb, a womb that Zara, a womb that gives birth, no longer a dead womb that is fruitless. He is telling her womb, her body, to come into line with his word that is spoken to Sarah. And he has called her Zara, and her body has got to line up with this name. And indeed, her body, Zara, the son of the promise, Isaac. Okay, so let's go back to Musala Lapeng, the one who remains at home. Why do I bring up this Musala Lapeng when I am talking about the name of King David? Okay, so I bring this Musala Lapeng, the one who remains at home, because King David was a Musala Lapeng in his home. He was the Musala Lapeng of his family. Him being the youngest son of 8 sons, he was the Musala Lapeng. Now, the story of the Musala Lapeng is a story that's told by our elders. This is a way in which we used to live back in the day before colonization, when our lifestyle was not diluted with the lifestyle of the West. The youngest son would be known as Musala Lapeng, the one who remains at home. And King David was the Musala Lapeng of his family. So the Musala Lapeng's duties were to help around the home. They were centered around the Lapa, or the home, the family home, not outside of the home. We know that King David's older brothers worked outside of the home. We know that 3 of them were warriors in the army of King Saul, according to the book of 1 Samuel. So the older brothers were allowed to work outside of the home. Those were their duties, and to be involved in the affairs of the community. But the duties of the Musala Lapeng was to do the duties of the home, herding the cattle, helping the father in his old age, representing the father. And those were the duties of the Musala Lapeng. And we know that King David was Musala Lapeng, and he was the one who was herding the cattle in his family. We know that while he was herding the cattle, he killed a lion, he killed a bear with his own hands when those animals threatened his livestock. So the elders tell of how the Musala Lapeng had great influence over the father. And they tell of how the influence of the Musala Lapeng was even bigger than that of the older brothers. And this often caused the older brothers to dislike the Musala Lapeng. We see this in the book of 1 Samuel as well, when the father of King David, Molaudi, Jesse, I'm going to be sharing on the true name of the father of David as well, which is Yas instead of Jesse. All right, but we'll be calling him Jesse for now. So Jesse sent David to take some supplies for his 3 older brothers, which were in the army of King Saul. And so when King David arrived there as a messenger from his father, he overheard the Goliath, we see that his brothers were not pleased with David. Immediately they began to attack him. They scolded him. They said, "What are you doing here? We know you have an evil heart. We know you are just here to mock. We know you are just here to be a spectator, just to watch. And we know that this was not the truth, because in the scripture we know that the father Jesse had sent David to go to the army for good, actually, to provide for them supplies. Okay, so there's no evidence that he came there to be for some other malicious reason, but we know that he was there, in fact, for the good of his three brothers. So this kind of supports what the elders tell us, that the Musalalapeng was often disliked by his older brothers. Okay, so we know that what happened when King David delivered those supplies to his brothers. He ended up overhearing the Goliath, and he then offered to be the one to kill Goliath. All right, now this is where this name Mulawudi comes in. So this is where King David got this name Mulawudi, where David got this name Mulawudi, which means ruler or commander. So the name Mulawudi, or a Mulawudi, was chosen based on his courage and skill in war. And the elders tell that the Musalalapeng often became the Mulawudi. I suppose with the Musalalapeng's experience running the affairs of the home, and we've seen how King David became experienced and trained as a Musalalapeng, how he was trained in warfare during his time as a Musalalapeng, and how he honed that gift and that skill during that time as a Musalalapeng when he was looking after the affairs of his home, when he was taking care of the cattle and killed a bear and a lion. So we know that he was skilled in war. And we know that this is a skill that he demonstrated, and this is a courage that he demonstrated in front of the whole of Israel when nobody had the courage to face Goliath, when for 40 days Goliath came out every day challenging the armies of Israel, and there was no one taking him up on that challenge. But David demonstrated this courage in front of King Saul and the whole of Israel. And he said, "I will take him on." And indeed, he ended up slaying Goliath with a stone and a sling. And this is how David got his name Mulawudi. This is how he now was no longer called Musalalapeng. Now he was called Mulawudi. And the duties of the Mulawudi was to be the commander of the army of his tribe. Okay, now we are going to go on and look at the covenant relationship between David and Jonathan. Okay, so I'm going to start by explaining Ulwaluko, or the initiation into manhood. So this is something that the Bantu people practiced. This was an institution for the Bantu people, and all of them back in the day practiced it. I know that now not all the Bantu tribes practice Ulwaluko, which is initiation into manhood. I also have the Bar Mitzvah, which is what the Jewish people practice, And that's their initiation into manhood, where they have a party, and I don't know the details of what goes on in there, but I'm going to talk about ulwaluko, which is when a boy takes a jump from boyhood to manhood. Okay, so this boy goes out to a certain place for a certain amount of time and spends time there and gets taught lessons and laws and certain things that I do not have knowledge of, because as a woman I don't take part in this ulwaluko, okay, initiation into manhood. But when someone who has gone in there as a boy comes out, he's a different person. You know, he does not participate in childish acts, and he has a different status in society now. He is now a man. He can now take a wife. He can do things that he couldn't do before as a boy. He can join the army and become a warrior, and he can take up some important positions of responsibility within the community. He can attend to matters that are pertinent to the community. So he can attend to the imbizo, he can attend the meetings that are convened by the king to discuss issues in the community. So now he is a man. Sometimes he gets a new name when he comes back as a man. Now, this ulwaluko is an important institution of the Bantu people. It's a foundation of our social system. As I've said, now that we still practice this ulwaluko, but not all the tribes practice it nowadays. But I'm going to talk about when we used to practice it, when all the tribes used to practice it. So a lot of things happened during this initiation. Now, the one that I want to talk about was the establishment of covenant relationships within that initiation institution and within that initiation period. So the elders talk about how boys who attended the initiation from boyhood to manhood together were bound by a special friendship. And so they explained that this friendship was so strong that they would literally be willing to die for a fellow initiate. So this friendship was characterized by support for one another, building one another, looking out for one another, helping one another in any way possible. And this friendship even extended to generations to come. So two men who were in the initiation together, their friendship extended and continued with their own sons, and it went on for generations. So there was something very significant about these ulwaluko and covenant relationships. It is said that the fellow initiates, formed this tight group. Like it says that they would also be in the same regiment in the army, and they would fight for each other, and they would encourage each other to be men of right standing in the community. They would hold each other accountable, and this kind of friendship reminded me now of the friendship between Mulawudi, or King David and Jonathan. Mulawudi and Jonathan. This is the kind of friendship that they have. And now our elders tell us that this is the same kind of friendship that the Bantu men had after initiation. So I think that, I'm convinced that this is the reason why Jonathan even went against his father to protect David. This is why Jonathan was spying on his father for David. He went against his father because he knew that if it were not for him, David would have been killed by King Saul, because they had this covenant friendship that he could not go against. If it meant that he go against his father, he did. He had to choose the covenant relationship over his relationship with his father. So that is how strong that relationship was, the covenant relationship amongst the Bantu men, because of the institution of Ulwaluk. I hope I am able to explain this. Yes, so, and I hope that it explains the relationship between King David and and Jonathan. And we have to remember that David was actually a rival. He was supposed to be a rival of Jonathan, because David was the one who was next on the throne of Israel. Yet Jonathan was the heir to that throne. But because he was bound by this covenant, he supported David so that he could live to be the one to take up that throne. Because of the Bantu covenants, the Bantu friendships that were very strong, that were very powerful, I so wish that we still had these covenants, these friendships amongst our Bantu people, covenants where our men supported each other, they encouraged each other in righteousness, and loved one another and were brotherly and did not lead each other astray, and protected each other instead of killing each other. And last but not least, today I'm just gonna before I close this video, I'm gonna look at the purification after childbirth, which is found in the book of Leviticus 12. Okay, so we know that according to the law of Moses, a woman was declared unclean after the birth of a child. Now, this is the case as well with Bantu people. Back in the day, a woman was declared unclean after the birth of a child. Now, we still, even up until today, we do require the woman to go back to her home of birth after giving birth and spend some time there. So now, in the olden days, the woman was required to be at home with her parents, birth parents, and leave her marital home and go back to her birth home, her home of birth, where her parents live, and spend some time there so that she could go through the bleeding period and go through the whatever periods in which she was declared unclean. And then after that period was over, the woman would go back to her marital home to resume her duties as a wife, because in the scripture it says in the law, according to the law of Moses, like if you read Leviticus or Deuteronomy, these laws are mentioned there. If a woman is bleeding, she's declared unclean. That was the case even in the Bantu people. They practiced that law. If a girl was on her monthly periods, she was declared unclean and she had to be secluded. She couldn't perform her duties within her home. She couldn't cook for her family. She couldn't serve her family. She couldn't touch certain things, couldn't eat certain things. She had to be in isolation until the bleeding was over. And then she could, she was now declared clean and she could resume her duties. Okay. So that was the case with the married women after giving birth as well. They were declared unclean and had to spend some time away from their marital home and be at their parents' home. Now, what I want to get to is this. When at the end of the unclean period of a woman who's just given birth, there was now a celebration or a ritual that was performed when the woman now went back to her marital home. And there were certain sacrifices made. This process of the woman going back from her parents' home to their marital home was called Goroso or Ingoduso. Goroso is the Sesotho word. Ingoduso will be the Nguni word or Sitosa word, which means the homecoming, because this is the process by which the woman went from her parents' home back to her marital home. So this whole process or tradition is called Ingoduso or Goroso, which means homecoming. Now what I want to get to is that this Ingoduso is the actual name of the second book of scripture, which we call Exodus. The correct name for that book is Ingoduso, which means the homecoming. As we know, Exodus is the book which details the traveling home to the promised land of the children of Israel from their land of enslavement, which is Egypt. So it is a homecoming Exodus for the children of Israel as they travel to their promised land of Canaan or Canaan. All right, so the second book in scripture is actually Ingoduso and not Exodus. All right, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time. You are blessed. We will be sharing as the Father reveals. You are blessed.